Hello and welcome to the Nano Film Improv Podcast. I'm Dave Heron. This podcast is about my trials and tribulations associated with improv comedy and doing it, performing it, rehearsing it. So this is really a cathartic outpouring of the things that I've learnt, the things that I'm struggling with, and an opportunity to share with you and hear from you also some of the things that have worked for you, and equally there'll be some things on this podcast that you have tried that don't work for you. It's all very subjective. My experience level is, well, I've had a few years experience doing improv. I've taught a bit of improv. I've performed with a whole range of exciting and talented improvisers and learnt from sets that have gone well and sets that haven't gone well. And this is all part of an evolution for me as well. So you're very welcome in joining me on this podcast. So this week I wanted to talk about hosting shows, either main stage shows or jams, basically anywhere where I'm acting as the MC, introducing acts, warming the audience up, and then of course closing the show and doing any promotions that are needed, etc. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I think I've had mixed views about it. I felt myself going to a place where I was feeling like I didn't want to host. But of course my experience has been very positive of hosting. I've enjoyed it when I've done it. I've had very positive feedback from audience members and groups. But there's always been something lurking, and I wanted to explore that a little bit. And I think the first thing to say is, in some instances, definitely not all, but in some instances, there has had to be a trade-off between doing improv and hosting. And I've not liked that trade-off. I don't see why the two have to necessarily be mutually exclusive. So I think that's the thing that's been making me nervous about hosting, is that it's been at the expense of doing improv in the same show. So for me now, going forward, what I want to resolve is, if I'm going to be hosting a show, I also want to be performing improv as well. The two, in my opinion, should not necessarily be mutually exclusive. And I think through exploring that, it's made me realise that I don't dislike hosting. It's just the fact that I don't want it to be at the expense of having the opportunity to perform improv with some wonderful improvisers. The second thing I wanted to explore was, what is the role of the host? I've seen many people do hosting, and including myself, where they follow the same format. You come on stage, you ask how everyone's doing, you then say that you've got some improv acts, you then ask who's seen improv and who hasn't seen improv, get a whoop and a woo, and then you warm the audience up, conventionally by asking them their name, or then asking them to say the person's name next to them. And it feels very formulaic. It doesn't feel very original. And so I've tried to start using different techniques to introduce improv shows, to host improv shows. One of the things I tried recently was an improv auction. This is where I would pretend we were all at an auction, and I would bring on an object by doing object work and start a bidding war for this imaginary improv object. So it could be, for example, a delicate glass brick, and then start a bidding war for the delicate glass brick. And then, of course, the end of the thing would be going, and I would throw the brick into the audience and it would shatter. And so I would bring different objects onto the stage, mime them, show them off in a way to get the audience warmed up with shouting things out, in a way just to get the audience to shout things out, and of course just to get the spirit of the show and the fun nature of the show going as well before the acts came on stage. But it's trying to do something a little bit different. But then it got me thinking, well, why am I trying to do something different? What is the essence? What is the purpose of the host? Clearly, it is to get the audience comfortable, that they're in a safe place, get the audience comfortable to get warmed up, to shout things out, and to put them in a very positive mood. But I assume you'd be in a positive mood already if you were attending a comedy act. Historically, when I've been hosting, all I've thought is get up on stage, do lots of big energy, get them to shout things out, and then leave as quickly as possible. And then even between each of the acts coming up, keep the applause going, keep the wildness going from the audience and the sheer joy and excitement, and then get off stage quickly. So it almost seems at times like quite a redundant role because all you're doing is you're trying to hype the energy up as a spike and then get off the stage very quickly. And it made me wonder whether indeed there's any necessity to actually have a host. Could you just introduce the acts from an overhead PA system, announcing it from the back, from the tech box, for example? But now my thinking has changed. I think it's more than just getting on stage, hyping the energy up, and then leaving the stage. Equally, I don't think it's an opportunity, and I have seen this before, where compares go on stage and use it as an opportunity to do some stand-up material. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. And I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong. Clearly, if you've warmed the audience up and you're good at stand-up and you can get them ready for it, that's great. The challenge is that if you start doing a stand-up set in an improv comedy night, then you've kind of got a slight clash, I think, a slight clash between different styles of comedy. But is there a way that the hosting itself can become a set like some of the other improv acts performing that evening? And I think there is a role for the host to be part of their own act in an evening of improv. I think there must be a way, and I don't have it clear in my head right now, but there must be a way of embellishing some of the tools and tricks used by improvisers in their own improv sets as part of a hosting approach. Is there a way you could bring object work onto the stage? Is there a way that you could show strong emotion or variation of emotion? Is there a way you could have a connection with an audience member or audience members themselves in the same way that you would have a connection with another improviser on stage? Is there a way you can yes and some dialogue with audience members? Little things like that. Could you bring that into your hosting approach? Could you bring characters in as well? Do you have to be yourself as the host? Could you actually come on as a type of character? These are things I haven't explored, and I'll probably come back to it at a later podcast to see whether they worked or not. But is there a way that the host's emceeing can also be a mini set within the entire improv night? And that's something that I'm going to try and explore, because I think once you can crack that, you move away from it being a very formulaic approach to hosting, where, as I said, you ask the audience their name after three and you get them to shout out a random animal, that sort of thing, to something that's far more original, authentic, and very, very engaging. Now, recently I did a two-prov set with my good friend Lewis Hill as part of We Are Dave Presents, and we did We Are Dave Presents Mood Lighting. And if you're not aware what that is, go and look that up, what that is. It's my new two-prov set where the audience control the emotion within the scene. And we did it at the wonderful Extreme Improv at the Camden Comedy Club last week. And there I saw a very different approach to hosting by the wonderful host David, who runs Extreme Improv. And his hosting was absolutely on point. It was quite brutalistic, and I mean that in a positive sense. It was brutalistic insofar as he could make jokes about the acts. He could make jokes, mainly about jokes, not necessarily about the guest acts themselves, but actually about the other improvisers who were friends of his who came up and did short form games with him. But actually, it led to a very playful edge, something I've talked about a lot before, and it was unique, in my opinion, of experiencing hosting. It was unique in a hosting sense, because it played with the improvisers, and he was almost encouraging his other improvisers who he was doing short form games with to challenge him as well. And that was a very different style of hosting than what I've seen before. And I don't think David would mind, hopefully, me saying it was brutalistic, because that's what it was. But I really enjoyed it, and I've never seen that type of hosting done before. It was very unconventional, but he held it all together. It was straight running, it was very slick, it was very smooth. He knew exactly what was coming next, and not at any stage did I feel as an audience member watching before I went on stage that he wasn't clear what was actually happening. It was on point, it was playful with the other improvisers, and it was very, very engaging with the audience itself without being the classic tell me your name after three. So there are clearly ways that I can enhance my hosting experience without it being at the expense of improv. And indeed, is there a way that I can resolve my very first point about the trade-off between improv and hosting if I can combine the two together? Possibly. One to watch and one to have many ideas to develop going forward. So thanks very much for listening to the Nano Film Improv podcast, and I'll catch you in the next one.